All right, so let's just start this off now. If you guys are having any issues seeing my screen, just let me know. But I think you guys should be all set. All right, I just want to thank you guys for attending this webinar today. My name is Stan Matthews, Network Engineer at Datamart. Here with me are my colleagues Ryan Wolfling, Network Engineer, Jaewon Kim, who manages the support team. In addition, we also have David Watanabe, Solutions Architect from ShoreTel, and he's involved with a multitude of areas, including but not limited to technical sales. So in our meetings here at Datamart, we realize that our customers may not always take full advantage of the vast number of features that ShoreTel has to offer. In order to resolve this issue, we've decided to have this webinar today to help strengthen your infrastructure. So today we'll be discussing the process of how to virtualize ShoreTel's products. We'll also touch base with topics such as the different advantages, the types of devices that can be virtualized, as well as the different platforms to perform this task. So just to give you a quick outline of the webinar today, we're going to first go through the advantages of virtualization, then go through the different ShoreTel devices that you can virtualize. Then we'll move on to the different platforms, and then the requirements for your environment in order to do this. And then lastly, we'll just briefly talk about the implementation process of doing all this. So during this webinar on virtualization, we encourage you to feel free in asking questions. We're all here to give an overview in virtualizing these devices, so any and all questions will help for discussion and will also help the group. So just to start off, the general concept of virtualization, as you guys may know already, is to be able to eliminate the need for physical devices at any location. It's a technique that allows the consolidation of multiple systems or servers to run on a single device. Generally, it provides the ability to accomplish more with less hardware and less management. So, to start things off with the different advantages. One of the first advantages that we can discuss is utilizing an existing environment, virtual environment that you guys have already set up. This makes adding ShoreTel equipment easy and useful. And this also eliminates the initial cost of setting up the environment as well. And having an existing system in place helps to provide ownership for maintenance as well as an initial implementation. Also, it helps for consolidation and modernizing your infrastructure. So for example, it usually reduces hardware and operating costs by as much as 50% and energy costs by as much as 80%. And because of all of this, it helps to save around thousands of dollars per year for each virtualized server workload. This also reduces the time it takes to provision new servers by as much as 70%. This decreases downtime and improves reliability with business continuity and has built-in disaster recovery. You can also deliver IT services on demand. It's independent of any hardware, operating systems, applications, or any other infrastructure providers. As you can see, flexibility is also prevalent in deploying these different options. You have the choice to pick a deployment type as well. You have whether you want to deploy virtually in a data center or remote office physically. You have the power to decide based on your limitations on your environment. You also have the ability to pick and choose which devices you'd like to virtualize as well. And as easy it is to deploy these devices, it's also easy to remove devices as well that you've already virtualized. For example, you can distribute your virtual infrastructure so it's centralized at the core, edge, or a combination of two in a hybrid option. In architecture where it's centralized at the core, all virtual devices are located at the HQ or data center, and the ITSP gives you service to the network at the HQ where it's centralized. And as you can see in this slide, in architecture where it's distributed to the edge, the voice switches and HQ server are located at the HQ or data center but also voice switches are implemented at remote sites. And also the ITSP and the PSTN provider gives service to the voice switches at both HQ and remote sites at the edges. And if you like both of those and can't decide, you can create your own hybrid model, which has servers and voice switches existing in both the HQ and our data center, and the voice switches existing in the remote sites. The ITSP provides service to the network at the HQ, and then the PSTN provides service to the voice switches at the HQ and remote sites. So as you can see, scalability is also a big advantage in virtualizing your system. Based on this graph, you can see in a 220T1A, you can implement a maximum of 220 phones, 24 make-me conference ports, 8 hunt groups, 220 SIP trunks without media proxy, or 20 SIP trunks with media proxy. In a virtual machine, you can increase that number up to 1,000 phones, 60 make-me conference ports, 40 hunt groups, and 500 SIP trunks with media proxy. There's a big difference between the two. There's also the ease of deployment. So it's the same as deploying a physical appliance, which is easy to manage as well. And the licensing is a little bit different. You have your virtual phone capacity license, your virtual SIP trunk license, but it's the same as the collaboration licenses for virtual or physical appliances. And also, with ease of administration, the redundancy is also the same as physical implementation, which is N+1. So in the case of a failover, you have the option to either use a physical switch or a virtual spare switch anywhere in the network. And this redundancy also helps to eliminate drop calls as well in your environment. And lastly, last advantage that I'm going to be talking about is just the total cost of ownership. You can leverage, obviously, like I said before, you can leverage existing infrastructures, which decreases the initial costs. You can also mix and match hardware-based and virtual appliances managed throughout the same admin interface as well. And also, you can increase capacities for number of phones, SIP trunks, and IPT as well. Next, I'm going to be passing it on to Ryan to talk about the different components.
Yeah, so here's a brief overview of some of the system components that we're going to be talking about today. First, under administration, there's the ShoreTel headquarters server with unified messaging. I know a lot of our customers already utilize a virtual headquarters server, and it's been around for around a year or so. Next is the unified communications platform. Under this, we have the virtual IP phone switch, the virtual SIP trunk switch, and the session border controller, which is an in-gate separator. On the new platform that has come out for ShoreTel, there is the ShoreTel Connect Edge Gateway, and also there is a Linux DVS server, which I know a lot of our customers are looking forward to. In addition, for IM and conferencing, there is the SA, which is the service appliance, and you are now allowed to virtualize that. And that has also been available for a little while now. In addition, there's mobility, which is the virtual mobility router, and there's the contact center. And for this, it's really having a virtual DVS server that you can place the contact center software on. So just to go over the devices, we're going to start out with the virtual IP phone switch. This switch supports all non-TDM features, which means that there's no physical trunks or analog phones. In addition, it has up to 1,000 IP phones per switch. And lastly, one of the nicest things about this is you can use this for that N+1 redundancy as a virtual spare phone switch. So as some of our customers, an important thing is redundancy, and you can have a physical piece of hardware for that failover switch, but this is a nice alternative to that. In addition, the next thing is the ShoreTel virtual SIP trunk switch, and this gives you the option to have up to 500 SIP trunks with media proxy, or you can have 100 SIP trunks without that media proxy. And essentially, for those of you who don't know, the media proxy, it has this feature parity with a PRI. So it allows for hairpinning, DTMF, conferencing, monitoring, and recording on those SIP trunks. It also allows you to allocate resources. Generally on a physical piece of hardware, you can get one SIP trunk with media proxy when you allocate those resources to a port. On this, it gives you a lot more capacity to do so. The next one that we're going to move on to is the SA, the service appliance. Currently, there's the SA100 and the SA400 available. This supports all existing audio, web, IM features as these physical devices. It has the maximum system capacity, which is 5 of them per system. And you can have up to 200 audio, 200 web, and 2000 IM per virtual SA. So it does give you an increased capacity for web. And next, if you go back, Stanley is going to be talking about virtualization platforms.
I think Nick, you asked a question. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Yeah, we'll be able to give it to you, for you guys. We're actually going to be attaching deployment guides as well, so just in case you guys need them. All right, so just for platforms, first of all, I'm just going to talk about VMware ESX. That's the most popular one that people use. ShoreTel appliances, they're all supported for VMware. This includes HQ server, DVS, and phone switches. ShoreTel also supports virtualizing ShoreTel versions 11 and higher, as well as ESX 4.0 platforms and higher. ShoreTel also recommends using the VMX Net3 network adapter just for best performance-wise. In terms of installation process, it's relatively simple, straightforward. Once the machine is specified in the VMware configuration, it's as simple as adding the basic network IP components, including the address of the Shoreware HQ server. So the machine will ultimately configure, load, become available as a virtual machine on your ESX platform. And then from that point on, there's little difference to the installation of a virtual appliance versus a real ShoreGear switch in Shoreware Director. The basic difference has to do with the selection of the hardware platform. Normally, for a physical device, you would select an SA100 or a ShoreGear 50, for example. In the case of the virtual appliance, you just select a new category from the drop-down menu that indicates the type of appliance you're installing. Aside from that, the rest of the config is the same. The virtual appliances behave like the normal orange ShoreGear boxes. They even require firmware upgrades as well, even though they're virtual. They also appear in the diagnosis and monitoring tool, as well as a quick view tool. And they operate as the same as their physical counterparts. And in terms of Hyper-V, Hyper-V is a little bit limited as ShoreTel only supports the HQ server and the DVS. So aside from those two, you can't really install or virtualize any other components with Hyper-V. And like I said with Nick, we're going to be supplying the deployment guides for you guys, in case you guys need them. Manny asked a question. Can Nick be switched to VMX Net3 on the VM if the VMs was created with the E1000 already?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
And one of the things that's important to note is when you're using VMware, you can access the VMware tools, which actually allows for you to download the driver.
For the VMX Net3.
For the VMX Net3.
Yep. And then I'm going to pass it back on to Ryan for the requirements.
Yep, and one thing I want to talk about as well is there's some other devices that actually you can use in addition to the ones that I've already mentioned. There's the ShoreTel Virtual Mobility Router, and this can allow up to 1,000 users or 500 secure remote voice users. In addition, you can also have up to 300 calls with transcoding or 200 secure remote voice calls. The next two I'm going to group together is the HQ and DVS. As I aforementioned, these have been around for a while. We have a lot of customers that already virtualize this part of their ShoreTel system, and they can continue to do so instead of having a physical server itself. The Linux DVS server is one of those things that we can look forward to on the Connect platform. Instead of having Windows Server 2012 or whatever version to have your DVS on, you can instead have this as an alternative. Next is the ShoreTel Edge Gateway. And for this, it basically allows users to connect remotely to the ShoreTel network by using a ShoreTel endpoint. And these endpoints are the IP400 series phones, as well as the ShoreTel Connect client, which is basically communicator under the Connect platform. And the best thing about this, the greatest advantage, is that it eliminates the need for a third-party VPN client. And it uses remote access secure tunneling, RAS protocol, for security. And from your 400 series phone, you can enable VPN and then use the FQDN as the gateway. And last but not least for the devices is the virtual in-gate separator. And this is a session border controller that allows for additional security for SIP trunks, and it allows for you to distribute the trunks across multiple SIP switches. And after stating all of that, there's obviously some requirements that go along with these. We have documentation that we're going to be providing you later that has all of these charts. So if it's a little bit too much information, you will have it for your reference later. And we're going to start out, and this is for the HQ server under VMware and Hyper-V. As you can see, there's different sizes. There's a small, medium, and large size implementation. And each of them have different tiers and different requirements due to the size. So if we take a look, for instance, under VMware, for a large size company, it's going to require 8 gigs of RAM, disk space 260 gigs, and then if you want any DVS servers, that's going to be an additional 130 gigs. Next is the virtual switch requirements. And this is for both the virtual phone switch and the virtual SIP trunk switch. For the virtual phone switch, you can see it's based on the number of phones that you have. And there's 3 different levels up to 250, between 250 and 500, and from 500 to 1,000. Each of them require 2 gigs of memory. For up to 1,000 phone, it's going to require a core. And the disk space is going to be 20 gigs throughout all 3 of those. And this is available for ESX 5.0, 5.1, or 5.5. The same thing that is going to go for the virtual SIP trunk switch. However, if you look at this one, you're going to notice, depending on the amount of trunks that you have, the amount of cores required is going to increase. So if you have 4 cores, you can be able to have up to 100 trunks. However, if you want to go up to 500, it's going to require 16. And generally what we recommend is if you're going to have, say, 300 of them, or a number that's greater than a large number, we recommend that you distribute them throughout multiple virtual trunk switches instead of having them all on the same switch itself. Next is the virtual service appliance and mobility router. For this one, you can see there's basically 2 implementations for the service appliance. There's one that supports 50 audio, 50 web, and 500 IM. And then there's also 200 video, or 2000 IM. For this one, it's going to require a little bit of, in order to go to the larger one, it's going to require more RAM and more hard disk space. And this is available for vSphere 5.0, 5.1, or 5.5. On the bottom, if you take a look, this is for the virtual mobility router, and this allows up to 1,000 mobile users. This is going to require 4 cores, 4 gigs of RAM, and 100 gigs of hard disk space. And this is going to be the same for ESX. It's going to be 5.0, 5.1, or 5.5. But it is important to note that it's going to require 2 network interfaces, one for the LAN interface and one for the WAN interface. And lastly for this, we're going to wrap up the requirements section with the virtual in-gate separator and the ShoreTel Edge Gateway. And if you notice, this also is based on how many trunks you have. There's 3 different tiers. And one of the important things is that for this particular one, instead of having an OVA file, you're going to have that ISO file, that disk image. And lastly is the the ShoreTel Edge Gateway. And as you can see, depending on the small, medium, or large configuration, there's going to be different requirements as well. And it's going to use that RAS protocol, as you can see there, and depending on how many calls you have, there's going to be different requirements. And then the next section, I'd just like to take a little bit of time to show you how you actually implement this. And the nice thing about the virtual switches, the virtual service appliance, and even the Edge Gateway is that you can manage it all under the admin interface, which is ShoreTel Director. I know a lot of you have been in here many times, and it's going to be the same process as adding a physical piece of equipment. You're going to log in, navigate to platform hardware, go to voice switches and primary, and there's going to be a little option to click new. Once you do so, you're going to have that drop-down menu with all the switches that you can add, and if you take a look at the bottom, there's the ShoreGear vPhone switch, the ShoreGear vTrunk switch, and the virtual appliance collaboration. And in the next slide, it's going to look very similar, but this is for Connect, and I just want to show you that you're also going to have the ability to add the virtual Edge Gateway from here. And once you do that, it's going to bring you to this page right here. And this is like any other page when you try to add a voice switch. It's going to ask for the name, description, which site it's located at, the IP address, and the MAC address of the switch. One thing to notice that's different is over here to the right of the name, it's going to say download switch image. This is going to be the OVA, the Open Virtualization Archive file that you're going to be putting on the virtual machine itself. So you can actually download that image right from Director. Last but not least is the licensing. There is a bit of different licensing with the virtual phone switch and the virtual trunk switch. If you take a look towards the bottom here, there's going to be the virtual phone license and the virtual switch SIP trunk license. This is going to be different for those of you that already have SIP implementations. There is a SIP trunk license for any physical pieces of hardware that you have the SIP trunks allocated to, and I just want to differentiate and make you aware of the fact that it is indeed a different license. And with that, we go to our questions and answers.
Let me just check to see if you guys chatted a little bit, aside from those couple questions. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you guys have any. We're here. Jay is here as well, and then we also have David from ShoreTel. If there's no questions, then thank you for attending, everyone. We really appreciate it. I think Jay wants to say something real quick.
I just want to make sure everyone got the information that they needed from this presentation. No questions at all for us?
get a copy. Yes, Bill, you'll be able to get a copy of the slides as well as any of the documents that we used in there.
All right, that's all the questions we have. We just want to thank you guys for attending. Obviously, you guys can call us or email us if you have any other questions outside of this presentation. But yeah, thank you so much for attending, and we hope to hear from you guys soon.